In this lesson, we're going to reveal the mantra letters using a Luma mat. Okay, so we're right here where we left off in our last lesson, and I went ahead and added the Luma mat to our other two blue kind of wave layers that we have here, and I just changed their tag color so they were a little bit easier to differentiate. So we have that middle one as yellow, the left one as blue, and the far right one as this kind of fuchsia pink color, and hopefully that'll be a little bit easier for you just to see how to stack those. I changed the stacking order just a little bit based on what I wanted the timing to look like. So I adjusted the timing just so that this one on the far right would come in first, then this one would come in shortly after here on the left, and then this middle one, I just turned that Luma mat upside down. So now it's revealing from the bottom. So, you know, you can do a lot of different things with something like this. So hopefully that gets you kind of thinking about how you can use these in your own workflow. So we're going to continue on with this Luma mat workflow for the mantra logo itself, not the logo image, but the logo type. So we've gone ahead in that main composition and we've got all these pieces here, and then if we go down one further, we've got our mantra logo image and our mantra logo type. So let's go ahead and go into that logo type, and we can see we've got the logo right here. Now, as of right now, this mantra feels very, very dark. I think it would be nice to kind of lighten this up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is we'll go in here and let's grab maybe this middle piece, which is going to be this one right here. And I'm going to take that in and kind of color sample that. So just select this yellow middle blue one, and I'm going to hit Control C to copy it. Then we'll go into our mantra logo type, and I'm just going to select the top letter and hit Control V to paste it in here. Now I'm going to take this out in a moment, but first I just want to kind of play around with the colors of these a little bit more. And actually, we don't even have to play with the colors inside of this. It probably would be faster to change the color on the outside of this logo. So actually, I'm going to delete that. It's still going to be where I can copy it. We'll go out to here where we see logo layers, and I'll hit Control V again to paste that. And you can see that I can just move that over there where I can see it. And I'm going to use a fill effect because this type doesn't have any kind of a gradient. So go over to your effects and presets, type in fill, grab that fill effect, and we'll drop it onto the mantra logo type. And it's going to default to red, but then we can just use our eyedropper to pick a color that's just a little bit lighter. So if I toggle on that fill, you can see how much of a difference that makes. I think that just looks a little bit better since we're using a black background. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that middle blue. We can delete that. We don't need it anymore. Now let's go into that mantra logo type and start animating. So remember, this will be a little bit lighter on the outside, but for now, I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so I want to get started just with this letter M here. So I'm going to go over to my project panel, and we want to use that same ink that we created over here for our blue kind of waves in our logo that we made. So go ahead and grab that comp, and you can just drag it right on top of everything. And I'm going to kind of scrub forward here. If you have trouble with that resolution like I was having, and obviously this shouldn't take too long to render or to scrub, so you can turn off that adaptive resolution just right here in your fast previews. Okay, so I'm going to make this smaller so it's a lot closer to that M size. I just held shift to constrain that proportionately. And then I'm just going to use my mouse wheel to zoom in here and just kind of get an idea of how big this actually needs to be. Now, this probably needs to be stretched out a little bit more, just so it's a little bit better usable. And let's go ahead and turn down the transparency of this. So I'm going to select my layer, hit the T key. We'll turn down that opacity just so I can see how they overlap. And let's go ahead and find where that last frame of that reveal is just by scrubbing to that. And I'm actually going to trim it here. So we'll hit Alt, end bracket, or close bracket, just so that is trimmed. Okay, so this looks like it's getting close to filling up that entire M, but it needs a little bit more. So I'm going to stretch this out here, kind of scoot it over a little bit. And that's just going to help with that reveal. Okay, so now let's go ahead and turn on our LumaMat. So we need to turn back up the transparency or the opacity of that ink layer. Then we'll come down here, grab our M, and change the track matte to LumaMat. You can see this is actually a pretty easy process. Now I want to do the same technique that I did on our last set of letters or our set of images where we had the LumaMat, where the actual image that's supposed to be there fades up underneath. So over about, let's do the last 6 frames, we'll have that fade up. So I'm going to go page up just from the end of this transition 6 times. So I'll hit page up 6 times. And now I know that this is where I need that fade to start. So I'm going to duplicate this M layer by hitting Control D. And then we'll just pull this all the way to the bottom there. Turn that so it doesn't have a track matte. Just turn that to none. And then we'll trim that to this position here, and this layer can actually be trimmed as well. So we'll hit Alt end bracket or close bracket to end that. So you can kind of see how we have this 2 layers that are the same height, or excuse me, the same length stacked on top of each other, and then we have this long layer that lasts all the way to the end. So I'm going to just fade this up. So we'll hit the T key to bring up our opacity, and we'll go ahead and set a keyframe at 100 and pull that to the end of that reveal, and then we'll take it down to 0 at the beginning. So now if I scrub this, can see that that's really nice and seamless. We don't really get a pop or anything like that. So I'm really happy with that. Now this is happening over about 50 frames, so it's a little bit more than a second. I'm okay with that. I think it's actually nice to kind of have this come in rather slowly. So I want to go ahead and just kind of repeat this process for the rest of my letters. So this should be pretty easy now that we already have the formula figured out. So what I'm going to do is we'll just grab that ink again. We'll kind of just scale this down. And let's zoom into our A. We'll have this begin. We can just begin it right at the beginning like our other piece. And I'm just going to kind of do the same technique where I turn down that opacity. We pull this out a little bit here. And I'm going to at least get this M and A done for you so that you can start to see maybe how we'll stagger the timing of this a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That looks like that's covering that A pretty nicely. So now I'll just, before I even mess with that LumaMat, just to save myself a little bit of time, I'll go ahead and select my letter and hit Control D to duplicate it. And then we'll come over here to the end of that set of keyframes. We'll take the first A and ink and we'll trim it by hitting Alt close bracket, and then we'll begin this second A that we've duplicated right there. So now it matches the same order as the M that we've already done. And then we can just select that A that's on top and turn it to a LumaMat. And we want to make sure that we have the opacity turned all the way up on that ink. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. And let's go ahead and grab the keyframes for that fade up from our M and drop them onto the A. So I'll select both of those, hit Control C to copy, select the layer I want to paste to, and hit Control V. Very nice. So that looks really good. I think that that is going to work very well. So let's go ahead and just move forward, let's say about 5 frames. And we'll push all 3 of those layers forward. So it's going to come in just a little bit after. Now I may end up tweaking the timing of this a little bit, but I do want to stagger it from left to right. So I'm going to continue this process for the rest of the letters. So I'll do the N, the T, the R, and the A. And they're going to look basically the same as this, and I'll just kind of continue staggering those over. And I'm probably not going to want this to last more than 100 frames because that's going to really start to get long. So the whole revealing of this logo, I'm not going to have take much longer than that. So I encourage you in between lessons to practice this, getting your LumaMat skills perfect. This one's actually probably a little bit easier even than what we were dealing with the logo image reveal because we're not having to use Liquify at all. We're just really scaling this down and allowing it to be just kind of that little square shape to reveal these letters. But you could use Liquify if you wanted it to follow the contour of any of the letters. That's certainly up to you how you want that to work. So in this lesson, we continued working on our LumaMat skills just by setting that up for these different letters. And in our next lesson, we're going to be creating a particle system that we're also going to use as a mat. So it'll just be a little bit different way. We won't be using the ink this time, but it's still going to be a mat that we're creating. So stick around and we'll continue learning different ways we can use mats to reveal in our next lesson.